Welcome to Small Business, Big Network, the podcast for small business owners who want big results from their networking. I'm Liz Drury, a freelance voiceover artist who knows that if you're not working, then networking could help. In this episode, I'm chatting to Nicky Thomas, who's the founder of the Growth Network. Nicky pretty much eats, sleeps and breathes networking, and she's got some great wisdom to impart, as you'll hear in this interview. So I'd like to welcome Nicky Thomas to the podcast, who is the owner of the Growth Community. Welcome, Nicky. So my first question is, when did you first get into networking? I mean, we met through networking, and I think you've been doing it possibly even longer than I have.
Well, do you know what? I was thinking about this the other day, actually. And actually, I think in terms of how long we've been networking, probably for most of my life. And when you perhaps didn't realise at the time you were networking, networking seems quite a deliberate thing, I think. But in reality, you've probably been networking for pretty much most of your life. And when I thought about it, when you look back on your life, I probably started networking when I was at university. I used to run the RAG Society at Lancaster University, and a lot of that was about getting people involved, getting them to help out with events and do some fundraising and things like that. So you were constantly out talking to people and getting to know people and encouraging them to get involved with things. So I think in terms of networking, we've probably been doing it for a very lot longer than we realise. I think in terms of deliberate networking, I started quite some time ago when I was running my internal communications agency. It was kind of the back end of me running that business, sort of towards the end of it. And I started thinking, go out and do some of this networking work. And really, people used to just go out and give business cards out. And that was about it, really. I used to come home and think, what was the point of that? And it was quite some time before started to learn that there was a lot more to it than that it wasn't just about going out and giving business cards out. It was about actually building relationships. And so I think for me, it's probably about sort of, 7 years ago when I was actively running a virtual assistant agency that I started to understand the process better. And now here I am. Several years later, I've now been running my own networking clubs for about 3.5 years.
So obviously this year, well, sort of 2020 and into 2021, things are looking very different at the moment to the way they used to. I mean, you and I met in the days when you could do physical face-to-face networking, and that's not happening at the moment. So how have you found the move to completely online networking?
I've got to be honest, back in March, when we could sort of see this pandemic coming over the hill towards us, I felt quite bleak about the whole thing, really. Well, I've always used the phone and I've used Skype, and I had in fact used a bit of Zoom before all of this happened, and I've always used that certainly for following up. I had very low expectation about what could be achieved online, and it was with quite a heavy heart that I moved my 6 meetings onto Zoom and just thought, well, it's either do that or die. So this is what we've got to do. I think the reality is, I can only say that it's completely blown me out of the water. I am absolutely amazed by the level of friendships and relationships that have been built over Zoom. I think the opportunity to network outside of the usual geography has really opened up opportunities for people. And I've grown a business from practically 0 to 75 members over a pandemic online, and it's thriving. So I think we've all been very surprised by what could be achieved online. And while I do long for the days of going back to face to face, very much so, I do think that Zoom is here to stay, and people will find their own level of whether they want to do that permanently or whether they want to find a happy medium between face to face and being online. But I don't think we can kind of ignore the fact that the opportunities online are vast and very exciting.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, even when we can go back to face-to-face networking, I think online will still continue in, in some way. And I think that's got to be a good thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think it would be sad if people just did only online networking.
Mm.
Um, but when I say, like I say to my members, when people feel kind of sad about not being able to get out and see each other, and I know at the moment we're currently in quite a significant lockdown, but as time goes on, there's ways of finding that happy medium. So you might have your networking meeting online, but there's nothing to stop you from going and having a coffee with somebody face to face as your follow up. There's nothing to say that you can get, 3 or 4 of the members of that particular group together to get to actually, work on ways that you can support each other. So I think we'll all find, you know, we're going to transition out of this.
Mm.
We're not going to go straight back into the rooms of 80 people in a room. It's not going to happen. We need to
No.
face facts, but we can find a way around it, and there are plenty of other opportunities for face-to-face interaction, even if we can't have it quite the way we want it.
So tell me about your new business and how that came about and how you've been able to grow that during a pandemic.
Well, I kind of had a bit of a double whammy at the beginning of the year in that obviously we're hit with a global pandemic, but also the partnership that I've been working under had kind of broken down. And so I found myself pretty much back at ground zero, having to start again. And while I think the thing for me was that I did have my network around me. I had a well-nurtured network of people who, are my trusted contacts. And when things were looking a bit bleak, they were there at my side going, right, come on, you do this on your own. We need to carry on. And so I dusted myself off and thought, right, okay, what do I love about networking? What do I love about referral networking? And what do I not like about it? So I had the space, I guess, while everyone was in lockdown, to keep the meetings ticking over online, but to give myself the opportunity to create a business that resonated from my own personal values, which is, I believe very strongly in relationship building. I believe very strongly in creating friendships, and people being able to support and help each other's success. It's not about transactions. It is about being genuinely wanting to help other people be successful. And so that's where the growth community kind of grew out of, really. And now I have 6 groups. We will have 2 new groups by one at the end of January and one at the beginning of February. So we'll have 8. There's 75 members on board now, and they are all 75 people who get what I'm trying to do. They're like-minded people. They're people who want to help each other, grow their business and help them grow themselves as much as anything else. I think networking isn't just about standing there with your hand out for referrals. There's so much more that goes with it. We learn things, we get ideas, we get support. There's just so much more to networking, and I think that was important to me, to just sort of, I guess, lead those people forward and create this really supportive place where people can help each other to do, to grow their businesses, really. So
So what do you think makes the growth community different from other networks that people might have been to before?
well, I think networking comes in all different shapes and sizes, and I think you've got to find the one that works for you, because we've all got different reasons for going networking, for starters. The first thing I think that's different, we run in cycles of 3. So our meetings are fortnightly. 2 of those meetings are networking meetings of guests, and one of those meetings is a member-only meeting. The thing for me was that referral networking, in general, it's a guest conversion process. There is that process going on in the background of passing referrals. The meetings themselves are very focused on guest converting, and I wanted to get away from that. So guests can come to my meetings up to 6 times a year, no obligation, no sales pitch, no pressure. They can just interact as a guest, and they don't need to do anything else. If they want to become a member, then my focus is on providing a member experience. So we have a training program which is run by my very good friend Mark Jarvis. He does all that side of the business, helps to create a foundation training so that every member of the community has a consistent level of knowledge and expectation. We have a member only Facebook group for the whole community, so regardless of which group you're in, you can interact with like-minded people who've all got the same outlook as you, but right across the country, and hopefully that's going to grow massively over the next year or two. But for me, it's about relationships. So having that quality member only meeting gives the people that time with each other to build the relationships, find out what each other needs and how they can help each other. And then we're back into the cycle again, where we bring the guests back in and we look at how we can extend our network and grow relationships that way. So it's just a slightly different way of doing referral networking. We're still single category, and we perhaps do a lot things similar to other brands out there, but my focus really is on the members, and the guests are just welcome to come in and out and enjoy the meetings.
What kind of hints and tips could you give to people who are perhaps coming networking for the first time? I know a lot of people this year have been starting up new businesses and trying out networking for the first time because they've had the opportunity while they're sitting at home in front of their computer. They can easily log on to a Zoom networking meeting. But if they've never been before, what kind of things do you think they need to bear in mind?
Well, one of the things I often say to people is try lots of different networking. And don't be put off if someone says, "Oh, I've done that one before and it was awful, I hated it," or "It didn't do anything for me." Don't judge things on that basis, because what works for one person doesn't always work for somebody else. So ask for recommendations from your contact. I would think about what kind of time of day you want to go networking, because you can network morning, noon, and night, quite frankly. Find the time that works for you. I would also, if you're quite nervous about going networking, then being prepared is a really good way of overcoming that. So if you are nervous about switching your camera on, or you are nervous about doing your pitch, then maybe put a backdrop on that. There are lots of backdrops out there that hides the house behind you if you feel very self-conscious of that. And practice your pitch. Think about what you're going to say in that. If it's a 1 minute or a 45 seconds or a 2 minute or whatever it is you've got, practice your pitch. Write it down if you need to. Don't be afraid to write it down. People are very tolerant of things like that and very supportive. I think if you've only got, if I go to somewhere I've got to do a 45-second pitch, I actually write it down myself, because I can't do anything in 45 seconds. Write it down, practice it. So the more comfortable you are doing it, the more confident you'll feel, and it won't feel quite so scary. And what I would say is think about why you're going networking. Because I think a lot of people don't think about that before they go networking. And for me, the reason I go networking is to meet some new people, and that's it. I think if you go out expecting to make a sale by doing a 1 minute pitch, or you'll be very disappointed and you'll feel that networking is a bit rubbish and you don't get anything from it. If you go out with the intention of just making friends with two new people, seeing a couple of people on a meeting that you would like to follow up with, and arrange a phone call or a coffee in the real world when we're allowed to, or a virtual Zoom call, or whatever you feel comfortable with, but have 2 conversations out of every meeting that you do, and just get to know each other. Don't worry too much about talking about business, because we don't know each other yet. People buy from people. You need to know the person first, and if that means you have 2 one-to-ones, then have 2 one-to-ones. If you just spend an hour talking nonsense to each other and having a laugh, then that's great, because you've made a friendship and you've made a relationship. So don't be afraid to do that, and then look at how you can extend that. A lot of people around me laugh at me because I use pictures of octopuses a lot, but for me, octopuses kind of represent what we're doing. It's about those tentacles. If I meet you, Liz, and we have a coffee, and then you say to me, "Nicky, I'd like to introduce you to such and such," and then I go and have coffee with them, and then they introduce me to somebody, and then they introduce me to somebody, my network is expanding and I'm meeting new people, and I don't have any expectations of doing business with those people. I might do something 2 years down the line. But the thing is, those people are helping me to go down the line and meet new people. And I think if you go out networking with that attitude, you will find that you enjoy it, for starters, and that you will ultimately get a lot more from it. And you won't feel quite so disappointed, because the business will come. You've just got to remember that we're trying to meet people, not just shove business cards at each other in the old world when we used to.
Yeah, I think that's all really great advice. I always say to people that networking, it isn't about selling. That's the last thing you should be thinking about when you walk into a networking meeting, because that will just turn people off completely.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception that networking is a sales activity, and it really isn't. And and I think it's hard sometimes for people who are maybe not business people, not business owners, but people who've been sent out by their company. I think there's a conception that they are expected to go out and sell stuff, and it's hard for them because they've got to prove their time. And sometimes it's those people who perhaps are trying to hard sell you. They've forgotten to learn to know the person first. We need to trust some people. We've got to go through that process. We've got to know and like and trust somebody, and then we can find out what they do, because then we're in a position to be able to actually recommend them, because we feel comfortable. If I spend a lot of time building my reputation. I'm not going to lose out on that by just randomly recommending somebody that will ultimately damage my reputation. So someone's got to prove themselves to me first before I'm going to recommend them. I'm happy to introduce, not a problem, but getting to the referral stage, that's not an overnight job. It's the long game.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely takes some time, doesn't it? So tell me about some connections you've made. What would you say is the best result you've had from networking? Maybe not for your own business, but maybe connecting other people together.
Oh, well, there's so many examples of this. And it's funny, sometimes you don't realize what chain reaction you've started until quite some time later, when someone comes back to you and says, that introduction you made led to this introduction, which led to that introduction, or you made an introduction and 2 years later a massive piece of business happened. I think there's so many of them, to be honest. People regularly come back to me and thank me that I've started something off with them. I always think what's quite interesting is you go out to have a conversation with someone with an expectation, right? Liz, you are a voiceover specialist, and I think I'm going to have a conversation about that. But somehow in the middle of the conversation, you make some throwaway remark about something else you do, and that opens up a whole new opportunity. I once encouraged a member to have a conversation with another member, and they'd been putting off having this conversation because they said, oh god, I don't know what we're going to talk about. I think one of them did something very creative and the other one did car parts or something, and I kept saying, well, you don't know who he knows, and you don't know what he can do to help you. And they went and they had their one-to-one and got sort of chatting and did the usual stuff. What do you do? What do I do? And at the very end of the conversation, in fact, I think this person did some kind of voiceover a bit like you, actually. This person just said, oh, I've got to go now. I'm off to my radio station job that I do. And they went, oh, this will be really good for you. And that throwaway comment led to a job for that. I'm sure she was a voiceover lady, who then went off to work on this radio station. And this was off a really simple one-to-one that she'd been putting off.
I think that story just shows that you should never turn down a one-to-one.
No.
Because you honestly don't know who other people know, or like you say, what other things they do outside of their business that you could help them with. And it's always worth having a chat to people, because you just don't know where it's going to lead.
I think that's quite important. I did some training for a charity that I work with recently. I trained all their community fundraisers, and I'd done like a little bit of an example for them to try and help them to understand the concept of networking. And like I said to them, you could go as a charity, you could go into a meeting and you might meet a lady that sells body shop products, and you think, oh, going to have a chat. So we have a chat, and in that conversation she tells you that she's recently taken up running. So you think, oh, okay, well, let's find out a bit more about the running, and you find out about that, and then you find out she's part of a running club. So you start chatting to her and you think, well, okay, let's get them all signed up for the whole 10K or whatever. So as a charity, you've got some income coming in. Then you find out who they run with, and then you get some more contacts from that. And then in that conversation, you might say that a mother's a keen member of the WI. So you say, oh, are they looking for a speaker? Yes, looking for a speaker. So then you get into the WI and you go and be a speaker. And in the conversation, one of the women in the WI says, oh, my husband is CEO of a big company and they're looking for a charity of the year. Let me introduce you. So it just shows you how a chain of reaction can happen from talking to someone who sells Body Shop. You might not have wanted to go and talk to, but look where it can go. And it does all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been my experience too. Well, it's been brilliant to chat to you, Nicky. And if people want to find out more about the growth community, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, they can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on there, so you'll no doubt track me down. But if you would like further information about what we do, go to the website, which is www.thegrowthcommunity.co.uk, and you can find out more about our meetings on there and how we work and what we do.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Nicky.
Thank you very much. It's been great to talk to you.
Thanks for listening to Small Business Big Network. If you found this podcast useful, please do rate, review and subscribe. And don't forget to share it with the rest of your network too.